And that's a good thing, but it's also not a good thing for people who are trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and the income disparity isn't quite as pronounced in Canada as it is in the United States.
Yes, quite right. So we should expect that the United States will lead in this, not because they're the natural leaders, but because they've got the real problem that we've just got Dear Harper and his problems. It's bad enough, but down there, well, I've wondered why this hasn't happened for the past 10, 20 years.
It's been brewing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I was reading recently that in Canada, these are Canadian numbers now, that the 1%, the top 1% controls the same economic interests as the bottom 20%. So that's quite significant. It's not as significant as it is in the States, but it is significant.
Sure. And we've been able to see that for some time. I mean, we have our multi-billionaires as well up here. But as you say, the numbers are not quite so striking. The 1%, we are the 99, is a very, very good slogan. And if it rings true, it's got a lot of strength behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you guys describe it. Canada, we have the same problems, but they're not quite as pronounced. I think one of the things that masks that fact, though, is our banking industry is completely non-competitive. So it appears to be strong.
Well, hold on. I'm not going to let you get away with that one too easy.
Okay. Yeah.
The Canadian banking system is very strong, and it is competitive. It's down in the States now, for instance, but it's been made strong by Canadian regulations. But that's not the real issue. I think the real issue is that in the States, well, the regulation is part of the issue, because in the States, what they did about, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was back in the Clinton era, they basically cut the chain and said, "Let the dogs loose." Was that when that song came out? Who let the dogs out?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what happened.
Yeah, who abandoned Glass-Steagall? Yeah.
Yeah.
And a similar thing happened in Canada at the same time. Brian Mulroney amended the Bank Act in 1991. Historically, in our banking industry, there was, or in our economy, there was the three pillars of the economy. There was the investment houses, there was the chartered banks, and then there was the insurance industry. And never could they interact or own each other, or you know what I mean. And it reduced risks for all of them.
Right.
But Mulroney altered the Bank Act in order that banks could buy out insurance companies and investment houses and deal in all three. And that's where we have the problem. Our banks per se are very profitable. They have sound business practices, but they own investment houses which are hugely exposed to a very shaky derivatives market.
Well, I think that the Canadian banks were less eager to buy up these crazy derivatives than the. I mean, the problem in the States is that the whole system, including the mergers in the banking industry, they're set up for high risk and high growth attacks on the market.
Yeah.
And the problem we're having now is that's precisely the wrong policy that we should be following. We don't need growth industry in banking now. In fact, we need the opposite. And the problem in the States is that it blew up in their face before they could deflate the bubble. Well, in Canada, we never quite had that bubble in the same way. So that's why we're safer, if you will, up here.
Okay.
But we'll get there eventually, unless because that's what Harper is trying to do is to heat up the whole thing and make it go gangbusters in growth. And that's just completely totally wrong.
I truly hope you're right about that. I don't have any information to confirm or disconfirm that, but I do hope you're right. I mean,
I don't have any crystal ball. I'll tell you that one.
Yeah, but insofar as
Dave has a crystal ball, or he had
Who's
one.
that?
Dave had one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We had.
Dave, can you break the impasse?
Well, I think this is a really interesting discussion, but at the same time, I think it's useful to try to keep foremost in our mind the major impetus behind the Occupy movements, and that is the income disparity. The banks, etc., are all complicit in this, but it's also around labor markets, and it's such a complex system that really what people, I think, are objecting to is more the income disparity, and they're just saying the system is broken. And we're not really hearing, I guess this is, in a way, it's a criticism of the Occupy movements, but we're not hearing any real solutions to the problems. At the same time, I think that, the diversity of the messaging that's coming out is a good and healthy thing, but sooner or later, somebody's going to ask the question, what do you want us to do about it? And I think, in my mind, that's the weakest link in this entire story, is nobody has a coherent narrative at this point to suggest solutions to the huge income disparities that we're seeing.
Well, Dave, I have some glad tidings for you from the Occupy Edmonton movement.
Okay, good.
They marched, Occupy Edmonton marched in support of a Robin Hood tax on October 29th, I believe, so it would have been Saturday.
There was also a march in Toronto, too.
I think the Robin Hood tax is a good first step in this.
Yeah.
This is what...
Let's
go ahead,
remember
Dave.
that the whole Robin Hood tax has been floated for a number of years by people, including Canada, at various G8 and G20 summits around the concept of just for those listeners who may not be so familiar with it, it's putting a small tax on economic financial transactions in the financial market.
Right. And just to give our listeners a little bit of history on the Robin Hood tax, an economist by the name of James Tobin suggested, what became known as the Tobin tax, in the wake of the Bretton Woods financial system being abandoned and Nixon taking the American dollar off the gold standard. And he suggested that as a way to stop unbridled speculation on currencies, that a small tax be placed on every currency transaction, so
bonds,
that the sloshing to and fro of and so that's evolved right now, and I guess the Robin Hood tax would be an expanded version of that, insofar as it would tax not just currency transactions, but derivatives transactions, etc. And they're putting forth an idea of a 1% tax.
I think it's less than that, Tony. I think it's like 0.05 they're putting forward.
Yeah,
it has to be small, because there are a large number of transactions which are necessary. Mm-hmm. You only want to discourage the ones that are really shaving the margins and which contribute enormously to instability.
Exactly.
Because basically they trade trillions of dollars in the blink of an eye, and then back again. So,
like companies like Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase, they do what's called algorithmic trading, and what they do is they park their servers as close as possible to the stock exchange and bombard the exchange with all kinds of back and forth buy and sell orders, from which they can skim fractions of a cent. You know what I mean? And this is terribly damaging to the real market valuations of stocks, etc. With this algorithmic trading, that would be immediately brought to a halt.
And they're saying that even after that type of trading was reduced through this type of tax, that in worldwide, if every country were to apply this type of tax to their banking system, $650 billion a year could be raised through this type of tax.
Yeah.
That's right. Now the next question becomes, what do we do with that money? If that money is just an excuse for further corporate tax cuts, etc., that's the danger that I see with this.
Yeah,
that's a good point, Dave.
Let's be clear. The vast majority of Western countries now are ruled by the corporate sector. And if we free up $650 billion in taxes worldwide, the corporations are well positioned to lobby for control of that money. And I think the next fight in this movement is going to be the proper application of those dollars for the relief of poverty, etc.
Yeah, well, one of the ways to do that would be to keep it out of the pockets of campaigning politicians and also out of lobbyists.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Are you a lobbyist now?
No, as a former campaigning politician.
Well, at the time you were campaigning, I wager you got some of your money from the taxpayers via the dollar per vote levy. Is that right or not?
Well,
that's almost gone now, but
it's all fundraising that raises those dollars, right? But you're right. There is up until now. There's the quarterly rebate that occurs, $1 per vote or whatever the current total.
Yeah, right. Well, I have no objection to that sort of thing because that's taxpayer funding of the public system, of the campaigning in general, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. What I'm talking about is targeted money going to people who are going to support my project. You know, nobody else.
I was just teasing you. I was just teasing you when I said that.
Oh, I know you were. But it's the thing is that that's one of the things that's corrupting the political system in the States. Is we don't have it in the same way up here. We certainly do have lobbying, and we certainly do have corporations which would push their money into willing hands if they could, but we have a little less of a rabid system up here. I think we have all of the diseases that they have in the States, but not as rabid, not as dreadful. So
we haven't got as sick of the system here yet. We still have something. We still have elections that are valid elections. Parties. Sometimes. No, I honestly believe that the Canadian electoral system is a safe approach to voting. In the States, there's a whole bunch of questions surrounding their voting. There's a whole bunch of questions surrounding what kind of differences there are between Democrats and Republicans. And I'm not going to fall into the trap and say there's absolutely none, but there seems to be less and less differences. And in Canada, at least, it seems like we still have some choice. We can go with a right-wing government, we can go with a centrist government, or we can go with a progressive government in the NDP.
Is that an open topic for discussion? Because I'd like to get into that one for a bit.
Sure,
go for it. Yeah.
Back in the I'm 65 now, so I remember a few years back. And back in the old days, it was the progressive conservatives and the liberals who occupied jointly the right and left of center, respectively. And there wasn't a whole lot of difference between them in terms of their economic policies and so on. There were differences, but they weren't large. So, essentially what you could do was say, look, this bunch of rascals is getting way out of hand. Let's check them out and put the other rascals in. And that's what happened for, I don't know probably several decades. Then comes along the Tory debacle, the Brian Mulroney and his rump of three. Well, it wasn't his rump, but anyway, the three members. Was it three? I think so. Who were left of the party, and all of a sudden they've destroyed the whole balance at the top.